Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Just a warning, there are some heavy themes contained in this episode. Shorts episode number 13, The Ludlow Family. In the Echuca Riverine Herald on the 3rd of October 1882, it announced a shocking accident. The Deniliquin correspondent of the Argus, telegraphing on Saturday, says, "This morning a poor man named Ludlow came in from Morago Station to the Deniliquin Hospital with his children and wife, who was near her confinement," so in other words, heavily pregnant. He stated that between 7 and 8 o'clock on Friday evening, his family was sleeping on that station, 3 of his children being under a dray and the rest of the family in a tent attached to it. The father says he went away for 10 minutes to look for a horse, and when he returned, he found that the wind had blown a large tree onto the dray, smashing it completely, and that one of the children, the eldest, was killed, and his wife and another child seriously injured. Had he been away a little longer, his whole family would have been burnt alive, as a fire, which was in the tent at the time of the accident, had set the place on fire. An inquest was held today on the deceased child, who was about 10 years old, when a verdict was returned of accidentally killed by the fall of a tree. The mother and the other child are now lying in hospital in a very critical state and are not expected to recover. So who was Ludlow that was referred to in the article? Well, he was Samuel Austin Ludlow, an American. He was born in 1836 at Southampton, Suffolk, in New York, United States. He was the second born of 6 children and the only one of his family to emigrate to Australia. When he was 9, his family visited England. When he was 15, he was employed as a labourer and he lived with the Cook family in Southampton. The record also stated he attended school. By 1873, Samuel had emigrated to Australia and he married Sarah Ann Dossett in Victoria when he was 37 and Sarah 17. Sarah had been born in England. Her mother died when she was only 2 and she lived with her aunt and uncle. William was their firstborn. He was born at Shepparton in Victoria in 1874 and Sarah followed in 1876 in Moama. In May 1877, in the Echuca Riverine Herald, Samuel is listed as living in Moama and is a householder. Harriet was born in Shepparton in 1878 and Antoinette in 1880 at 9 Mile Creek in Victoria. On the 7th of October 1882, in the Deniliquin Pastoral Times, it outlines the inquest into the accident. An inquest was held on Saturday last at the Deniliquin District Hospital before Dr. Noyes, touching the death of a boy named William Hudson Ludlow, about 10 years of age, who was killed on Friday night near the woolshed at Morago Station by a tree falling on him. The following evidence was taken. Samuel Austin Ludlow deposed that I'm the father of the deceased. I'm a shearer. I've been shearing at Morago Station. My wife and family were camped near the woolshed. The deceased and the 2 other children were camped in a tilted dray. The mother and the youngest child were in a tent close by. Everything was all right at 6 o'clock. I left and came to see whether my horse was feeding near a sandhill. I was absent from the camp about 20 minutes. When I returned, I heard my wife screaming. A tree had fallen on the dray, covering it and the tent. My wife was outside the tent when I saw her. The tent was beaten down by the branches of a tree. The youngest child was in the tent. My wife's clothes were on fire. The branches of the fallen tree had broken the dray. I pulled my wife out of the fire and extinguished the burning clothes. I called out for assistance from the hands at the station. They came and took the children from under the dray. The deceased was quite dead when they got him out. One of the remaining children, a girl about 4 years of age, was badly hurt, and the 3rd child escaped without injury. She's about 6 years of age. I took the children to the overseer's place and then removed them to the hospital, where I arrived at 4 o'clock on Saturday morning. They were attended to by the doctor. My wife and 2 children are still in the hospital. Before the tree fell, it was very squally weather. When the tree fell, a very violent squall was blowing for about 2 minutes. Isaac Jarvis deposed that he was the wardsman at Deniliquin District Hospital. At about 3:45 o'clock this morning, I was aroused by the last witness. I got up after hearing what the matter was and at once sent for Dr. Noyes. The doctor came before we had the mother into the ward. He examined the injuries and gave his orders. The body of the deceased was in the cart. The doctor directed that it should be placed in the dead house. The child appeared to have been dead some time. The body was cold. The skull was battered completely on the left side. The jury found that the deceased was accidentally killed by the fall of a tree on the night of the 29th of September near the woolshed at Morago Station. So after this sad event, it seems that the family moved on from Deniliquin, and in April 1883, Samuel was a fruiterer in Wangaratta. Their son Eugene was born in 1884 at Wangaratta, followed by Walter in 1895 in Rushworth. In the Tungamah Police Court on the 29th of January 1884, S. Ludlow, a hawker, deposed that the defendants abused him and broke his gun. Evidence was produced to prove that Ludlow pointed the gun at J. Tabulo, and the case was dismissed. In January 1887, in the Kyabram Union in Victoria, Samuel's listed as a harvest labourer, living at Rushworth but working at Tatura. In 1891, Samuel became an engine driver in Rushworth, and the following children were born in Rushworth. Agnes was born in 1888, but she died at the age of only 3. In the Melbourne Leader on the 21st of March 1891, it says an accident which terminated fatally happened on Saturday evening to a child belonging to a family named Ludlow residing in Rushworth. During the mother's absence, the children lighted a fire outside the house. The clothes of Agnes, 3 years old, took fire, and before assistance came, the child was burnt beyond recognition. So another tragic circumstance happening to the family. Walter was born in 1891 and Charles was born in 1893, but he only lived 1 year. In the Police Gazette in Victoria, 29th of February 1896, Samuel Austin Ludlow is charged on warrant with deserting his wife, Sarah Ann Ludlow, Rushworth, at Rushworth on the 27th of February. Description: Yankee, labourer, 60 years of age, 5 foot 10 or 11 inches high, medium build, dark complexion, hair and whiskers, turning grey, shaved on chin, is tattooed on both arms with a star, anchor and coconut trees, said to be working at or near Kyneton. There are also 2 other children born. Mary Ann was born in 1896 and Agnes born in July 1899, and it seems that they were not fathered by Samuel. In June 1901, Sarah was fined 1 shilling in default or 3 hours imprisonment for neglecting to send her child Walter to school in Rushworth. In March 1905, she was fined 2 shillings and 6 in default or 12 hours imprisonment for not sending her child May Ludlow to school at Rushworth. On the 20th of July 1906 in the Melbourne Age, a serious charge, Rushworth. A man named George Rice was charged before the courts with indecently and unlawfully assaulting an old woman named Sarah Ann Ludlow on the night of Sunday the 8th of July. The accused reserved his defence and was committed for trial in the Bendigo Supreme Court on the 21st of August. Bail was allowed in one surety of £100 and the accused in a like amount. And on the 22nd of August 1906 in the Bendigo Independent, a widow assaulted. George Rice, on bail, was presented on a charge of assaulting Sarah Ann Ludlow, a widow, at Rushworth on the 18th of July. On the night of the 8th, he stated that Mrs. Ludlow and her 2 daughters had gone to bed. There was a knock at the door and the mother asked who's there. The reply was Constable O'Brien. She got up and opened the door and the man came inside. He had just got inside when she said in alarm, "You're not Constable O'Brien." He said, "Yes, I am." He then caught her around the waist and knocked her down. She screamed and the man cleared off. Anne Ludlow and Mary Ludlow, her younger daughter, confirmed these statements in their evidence. Constable O'Brien stated that when Rice was arrested, he protested his innocence and said he was not near the house at the time stated. The defending counsel endeavoured to prove an alibi. The jury found Rice guilty of common assault and His Honour sentenced him to 24 hours imprisonment. And then on the 6th of August 1907 in the Melbourne Age, Rushworth, a woman named Sarah Ludlow, aged 53 years, who lived by herself near Dunlop's Hill, was found dead in her bed on Saturday. She had not been seen about for a few days and police proceeded to her residence and, bursting in the door, found her dead. An inquiry was held and the medical testimony showed that the deceased had an affection of the lungs and heart. And Samuel was found dead on the 25th of September 1916 in Kyneton, Victoria. In the Melbourne Age on the 2nd of October 1916, pensioners' miserable existence. In Kyneton, Mr McLennan, the Deputy Coroner, held an inquiry on Friday into the death of an old age pensioner named Samuel Ludlow, 80, who was found dead in an old house on the farm of Mr Evans at Tilden. The evidence of the police showed that the deceased had been living a comfortless life. His bed consisted of an old straw mattress with a fragment of blanket and an old tent fly as covering. When the body was found, the nose and hands had been gnawed by rats. Death had evidently taken place 2 or 3 days previously. A verdict of death from natural causes was recorded. And it says that Mr John Sandford went by direction of his employer, Mr T Schuling of Tilden, to a property rented by Mr Evans and found in a house there a body of an old man named Samuel Ludlow, who's believed to be an old age pensioner. The body was lying on the floor. The deceased had been living in the house for several months past, and he has not been seen for some days. Mr Schooling was apprehensive and sent Sandford to look for him. The matter was reported to Sergeant Simmons, who instructed Constable Rudy and Bartles to go out and bring the body into the hospital morgue, which they did. There were no visible marks of violence on the body, but from its appearance the police presumed that the death had taken place 2 to 3 days previously. The nose and hands had been gnawed by mice or rats. Half a loaf of bread and a few potatoes were found in the house. Altogether, the surroundings disclosed that the deceased had lived under very neglected and unclean conditions. And part of the report from the coroner says the deceased was in a very neglected condition. He had only a piece of blanket, an old tent fly, and a few bags for bed covering. The surviving children of Samuel and Sarah Ludlow. The first was Sarah Francis, who was born in Moama, New South Wales in October 1875. She married William Henry Bond in Euroa in 1903 when she was 27. They were living in Carlton when they had their first child in 1903, then in Heathcote from 1905 and Euroa from 1913. They had 5 children, and Sarah died in 1941 in Preston, Victoria at the age of 65. Harriet was born in Shepparton in October 1877 and died of croup on the 29th of April 1883 at the age of only 5. Antoinette was born in April 1880 at 9 Mile Creek in Victoria. She married James Campbell Gordon in Euroa in 1903. They had 1 son. Antoinette died in 1969 in Fitzroy, Victoria at the age of 89. Eugene Anthony Ludlow was born in 1884 at Wangaratta. He worked as a labourer at Rimney near Ararat in 1914. By 1924 he was living in Springvale and was working as a market gardener. By 1931 he was living in North Richmond, and he died on the 7th of July 1959 in Parkville, Victoria, aged 75. Agnes was born in 1888 but died at the age of only 3 in March 1891 in Rushworth. Walter was born in 1891. He was a farm labourer in Rushworth in 1907 and used to help support his mother by giving her about 2 shillings and 6pence each fortnight. He died in Fitzroy in 1957 at the age of 66. Charles was born in 1893 and he lived only 1 year. The next child, Mary Ann Ludlow, was born on the 15th of July 1896 and was committed into state care on the 19th of September 1906 at the age of 10. Her notes say that she was residing in a dwelling with a prostitute. She was described as a half-caste negress, so her father must have been a black American. Her report says that she had been knocking about all night. Her and her sister had been telling those at school what had happened between their mother and men. Interestingly, her reputed father is listed on foster papers as being James Ilburn, a labourer of Rushworth. It says that he'd been in the habit of visiting the mother and cohabiting with her, paying 2 shillings or 2 shillings and 6pence each time he visited. He is a coloured man and proceeded against for maintenance, but the case was dismissed. I was unable to find any information on a James Ilburn. Her mother, Sarah Ann, was described as a washerwoman from Rushworth and of poor character. She's a reputed prostitute and has been criminally assaulted on more than 1 occasion. So it seems likely that Mary's father was James Ilburn. Mary Ann was initially placed in the girls' depot, then with a home in Castlemaine in November 1906. In October 1906, Sarah asked if she could communicate with her daughter, but this request was refused. In July 1910, she went into service with Mrs. O'Connor of Castlemaine and with Mrs. Hill of Colbernabin in June 1911. Her term under state care expired on the 15th of July 1916. She married Lewis Hall in 1918 and died in 1961 in Victoria at the age of 64. Agnes Mary Ludlow was born on the 28th of July 1899 in Rushworth. She was committed into state care in September 1906, aged 7, the same date and for the same reason as her older sister, with the same reputed parentage. Agnes went with her sister to the girls' depot, then she went into a home in Castlemaine in November 1906. She was hospitalised with diphtheria in May 1912. In August 1913, she went into service with Mrs. Aitken at the Savings Bank in Castlemaine, but only 5 weeks later was placed with Mrs. Gilpillan of Castlemaine. On the 17th of February 1915 in the Bendigo Independent, a young man named Christopher Roberts, son of a Malden resident, was charged with indecently assaulting a young girl ward of the state on Sunday night. He was remanded until Friday next in a bond of £100 and another of £100. The evidence tendered went to show that Roberts picked up with the girl on Sunday night after a religious service and took her to her home with Mrs. Gilpillan at the far end of the gardens. Instead of letting her go in, he got her to go inside the gardens, and as soon as they got inside the gate, a terrible screaming was heard. 2 young men named Bithell and Vaughan were sitting on a veranda nearby and they ran across. The accused was in a compromising position. They held on and saw him safely into the lockup, although the girl asked that he be let go as she did not want further trouble with the matter. And on the 18th of February 1915 in the Melbourne Age, in Castlemaine, Christopher Roberts was charged on Tuesday with unlawfully and indecently assaulting a ward of the state not quite 16 years old. The accused's father became surety for his son. And on the 20th of February 1915 in the Bendigo Independent, a timely arrest committed for trial, 2 men protect a girl. The evidence showed that Roberts did a cart in the way so prevalent among a certain sort of young men. He gave her the glad eye at the Salvation Army open air. She advised him to get converted. After the army meeting in the barracks, he followed her and asked to be allowed to see her home. She again advised conversion, but consented to walk with him. She told him she was 18, although she's really only 15 and a half. He said he was 20. When they got to a lonely road on the north side of the gardens, he knocked her down. She screamed for help 3 times and struggled with him. The next morning, the girl's brooch was found at the spot, and the ground about the place showed signs of a violent struggle. The bench committed the prisoner for trial at the next Castlemaine Assizes on the 16th of March. Bithell and Vaughan were complimented by the bench on their public-spirited action. And on the 18th of March 1915, at the sitting of the Criminal Court in Castlemaine yesterday, Christopher Roberts was charged with an offence against a girl under 16 years of age. Constable Savage said the girl's statements were true. The counsel addressed the jury, and after 20 minutes past 11, His Honour summed up against the accused. He informed the jury that the charge of attempting to carnally know had been withdrawn and said it was their duty to satisfy themselves that the girl was under 16 years of age. If they were not satisfied she was under that age, they had to decide whether she consented to the assault. At 1:20, they entered the court and gave the verdict of not guilty on each charge, meaning they were not satisfied the girl was under 16 years of age and that she consented to the assault. The accused was discharged. She was, in fact, 15 and a half years old. In April 1915, so just after this case, she was placed with Mrs. Hunter in Malvern, Victoria, and then 2 years later with Mrs. Little at Ivanhoe in Victoria. In September 1918, she went back to Mrs. Hunter, and in May 1919 was hospitalised due to influenza. She was discharged from state care in July 1919. She married Edwin Arthur Robertson in Malvern on the 23rd of March 1922 when she was 22 and Edwin 32. Edwin was a tramway employee. Edwin died on the 5th of January 1948. His death notice was in the Sun News Pictorial of Melbourne. At his residence at 7 Egerton Road, Armidale, Edwin Arthur Robertson, the dearly beloved husband of Agnes and loving father of Jean, Nancy, Peggy and Lynn, aged 58 years. And Agnes died on the 22nd of March 1966 in Mordialloc, Victoria, at the age of 66. So this family certainly were quite hard up and seemed to have fallen on hard times with the separation of their parents. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.